your chair. So you probably know a lot of this about me, in that my past career has been as a manager of international teams. I've had the pleasure of having a cross-functional team that ran 23 hours a day, starting in Sydney and ending in Perth, Australia. And there were times when I really wanted to hide in the outback, but they were a marvelous team and we produced some amazing software, which is still part of an ERP system that is highly rated by those people who use it. So I'm quite proud of that. I've been a quality manager in commercial software businesses and in consumer electronics, where we've launched innovative products. And more recently, I've been doing consulting work, both strategy and quality and IT project rescues in the private sector and the not-for-profit sector particularly, but also some in the public sector as well. And as part of the fun of my life, I get to be a visiting professor at the University of Warwick, teaching engineering management topics and governance around project management. So that's been great fun. And I think that's probably enough about me, but I'm sure that that you have the opportunity to read the list. So hopefully this screen should now move on. And yeah, this is what we're going to talk about this evening. As a quality professional, where have we been and where are we now? Particularly focusing in the computing world. I want to talk about what is VUCA and why does it matter, and what is happening in AI, and what does that mean for us as professionals. Now, if we look back to 2010, only a decade ago, we could see that quality professionals had a historic legacy. There were roles that overlapped engineering and business. We could have been talking about the quality professional as guardians of implementation, or designers of experiments, or arbiters of measurement. Some people were calling us the watchdogs of compliance. We were also critical friends and technical reviewers. And we've moved from quality control through quality assurance, and we're talking about quality management. And the context in 2010 was that we thought it was fast moving and uncertain. We were feeling the effects of a major financial collapse, uncertain economies, changing culture, and advancing technology. Quality was associated with testing still. It was seen as an overhead by some until we rediscovered the economics of software development. The earlier we can spot a problem and fix it, the easier and cheaper it is to solve. Pair programming and processes that design the test first pulled many of the unit testing aspects of quality in development back into development. And as a trainee programmer, I was firmly taught that this was where it belonged. Quality teams now focused further up the V on the coherency of requirements and design and integration and system testing. Quality professionals managed the certification process with outside bodies and with customers. They supported the knowledge management around standards. In some cases, that meant that they moved further away from the technical realm towards management. There was also an overlap with governance, handling that overlap between corporate governance and technical governance so that our development teams had a framework in which to work. The more innovative people flourish when they have guide rails around them. Compare how some writers and painters and other creatives react with dread to a blank sheet of paper or a clean canvas. It's just too open. The energy needed to be creative is spent on trying to find a theme. Writing prompts are really popular with writers, not because it tells them what to write, but because it reduces the possibilities sufficiently so that they can engage in their creative work. Similarly, if project proposals are always done in the same template, with the same processes and the same decision format, the energy and creativity is focused into the ideas and innovation. The quality role in governance and projects had also started to move towards organizational security and compliance, particularly with security standards. And in parallel to this, there was a movement towards what became GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, which caused some quality professionals to move into a compliance role around data. There was still a need for engineering education. We still needed Deming, Ishikawa, and Crosby. We need to remind managers in that changing the system within which people work and training them is much more effective, both in terms of achievement and in cost, than striving for a badge and simply punishing people for not getting it right. So that's where we were. Where are we now? Chaos? Well, not entirely. We still have some structure, but sometimes in quality and in management, it feels like a warehouse of jigsaws have been unboxed and dumped on your desk. VUCA is an acronym. As a term, it was first used in 1987. The US Army War College was looking for a model of how to handle training for officers, now that the certainty resulting from a known enemy was over. USSR was gone from their planning. VUCA is based on the leadership theories of Warren Bennis and Bert Nanus. V is for volatility, the nature and dynamics of change and the nature and speed of the change forces and change catalysts. U is for uncertainty, the lack of predictability, the prospects for surprise, our tentative awareness, and our missing the understanding of issues and events around us. C is our complexity focus, the multitude of forces, confounding of issues. There's no cause and effect chain, and there's confusion that surrounds some organizations. And all of this is wrapped up in ambiguity. A for ambiguity, the haziness of our reality, the potential to misread situations, the mixed meaning of conditions, and again, that cause and effect confusion. So let's look at that a bit deeper for our present state. We have volatility. Well, that's partly the pandemic, partly the commercial competition, partly social change, and partly the continuing technological advances. The rules are not the same this week as they were this time last year, and there looks to be no predictable path for change. Uncertainty is here too. We are at a point of technology change during a time of economic uncertainty, and this is likely to bring changes to the way business operate. But how that will affect each of us is not certain. This inflection point is significant and not product hype, although there are lots of products labelled with AI that might be hype. There are other changes in the horizon, from things like climate change and social changes. There will be things we can't predict that could have long-term influences over the lives of our children and grandchildren. 2020 has been an extraordinary year. Theatres have been shuttered, and some, including Dawn French, are predicting that that will mean our creative sector will have been learning new skills and creating new frameworks. I wonder how many technologists and scientists have been quietly working on something transformational. In 1928, the first year of the Great Depression, John Logie Baird demonstrated the first colour TV. While Isaac Newton was sheltering from the plague in the 1660s, he was on the family farm working on the law of gravity. Economic difficulties and epidemics won't stop advances in science and technology. The interesting thing is few of our ancestors would have had any awareness that Newton or John Logie Baird were working on these foundations of our modern life during those difficult times. What about complexity? Well, I believe we're moving from linear developments through a point where those developments are themselves interacting. Process automation continues. The Internet of Things and the associated sensors are increasing. Robotics is becoming more mature. Wearable devices and cloud computing have been around and continue to develop. Mobile data and unified communications. We're looking at 5G now, and there will be others. Electronic currencies, and I'm not just talking cyber currencies like Bitcoin, but cashless transactions too. And machine learning and artificial intelligence is really developing quickly. There are now more tools there than there have ever been, and more of those tools are now viable for real use. They've all been developing in their own tracks for most of my career. Those developments have been gaining pace since the 1990s, and they've all reached a point of maturity where we can start to integrate them. Unfortunately, none of these technologies were developed thinking of the others. That will mean that there is complexity in the integration, which might cause some interesting and unexpected developments in the next 30 years. Some of these things may be predictable in the future, and others might be unpleasant surprises. The area that is most obvious to me is the interaction between the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence, which may embed insidious biases in future wearable devices. And ambiguity surrounds us. Our view of the future is uncertain. The current trends can easily be misread. The media discussion about what is the new normal is only scratching the surface of the changed behaviour patterns we have experienced in 2020. We don't know how humans and businesses will interact in 10 years' time, but we instinctively know it's changing. There's also ambiguity around requirements for new systems using AI and the other technologies because the rules have not yet been fully defined. We do have standards like IEEE 7000 family, but these are not yet comprehensive. If we think of self-driving cars, we still don't understand what the acceptable risk is for a non-fatal accident. It is different for an automated vehicle than for a human driver. That irrationality doesn't stack up, but it is in most people's understanding of what is acceptable. Making a quality management case around these variables will continue to be taxing. Let's start with a little more specific about what is going to be required from quality professionals in this environment, where data is key to the logic of any system. In the old days of QA, a quality professional might have been tasked with desk-based code review, or to consider the test coverage in the test plan, or to estimate the sufficiency of test data. We will be continued to be involved in the discussions about which metrics are most appropriate, or which controls should be in place to measure and moderate systems that have inherent risks. With systems more complex, testing has been automated, and I can see that this will continue to grow. We will include the Internet of Things and sensors as systems become more integrated and cross the boundaries where test tools cannot currently go. Testing will expand to include so much data that the analysis of that data will slow down the work of testing. Artificial intelligence applied to test result data and code complexity analysis may allow human intelligent choices over what needs to be tested next. Humans will need to strengthen their understanding and skill in those areas of complex pattern recognition and determining the difference between special and common causes that artificial intelligence can't do for us. AI may be good at pattern recognition, but it can't understand the meaning of some of the patterns it finds. There's one area of the quality professional role where I believe that some of the old skills will need to be enhanced. Determining what is coincidence, what is consequence, and what is correlation may be difficult for AI for some decades. For example, the debate this year around the high COVID-19 case numbers and high test levels is a classic misinterpretation by some people. At a basic level, it is understanding the pattern between, for example, those people who go for a walk and buy a Sunday paper than read it online. It might be relevant to determine which comes first. Option 1, people who work are more likely to buy Sunday papers. Or option 2, people who buy physical papers are more likely to walk on Sundays. These questions sometimes matter in a more vital way. I'm told there's a link between clinical, that is suicidal depression, and type 1 diabetes in some patients. No expert has yet told me which is the cause, or if this is a correlation with other factors not yet known. Solving this could be the difference between improving the quality of life for these patients or saving lives. The work to improve our lives does not stop when AI has recognized a pattern. This is why explainable AI is so important. Quality professionals working on AI systems need to consider if the explanation is clear enough to allow a full review of any algorithm created, and so ensure that it is coherent with the real world. As an aside, coherent with the real world does not mean exact fit. An AI model is a model. Overfitting any model to a sample of data can force some frustrating anomalies in logic, or a lack of robustness for use with wider samples. Quality professionals will continue to work on some of the classic matters: how decisions are made and who makes them, what controls are put around that, in other words, governance. What assumptions are being made and do they still work? How is that monitored and tested? How remote and flexible working can be enabled and what that means for working practices. For example, does pair programming still work asynchronously? How do we assure our own systems are effective? How do we test and assure the products we produce? Will we still need an understanding of complete systems? Not just hardware or software, but how they interact and the boundaries between them. I guess that's a bit of a rhetorical question. We will also need to be able to advise on standards, both internal processes and international standards. There's a whole new realm for us to discover and expand. Bias will be the biggest problem. Data integrity is increasingly important, especially the data used to train AI. And there's an old question: is that tool being used for an appropriate use? It's so ancient in engineering quality, and yet it's re-emerged. It's so old that many quality professionals think that question is old engineering and has been handed over to health and safety. This question is back in a big way, especially for quality professionals working in procurement and the development of AI. And it will be a shock to our profession. Modularization, objects, and reuse are now so embedded in our development practices that we often don't stop to consider the history of the tools we use. In fact, we encourage developers to adapt existing tools, protocols, and code as a way of quickening the development. I've rarely heard a developer ask about the traceability of a tool in the way a chef might about her ingredients in today's world of food and biosecurity. Yet these are engineering terms from our foundations, And security is an increasing concern in IT and communication. AI will be the driver behind the return to thinking about source, traceability, and configuration management of code and data. AI and DevOps will have to pay even more attention to these areas. If an AI system has been developed to be used for a specific purpose, the data chosen to train that algorithm will have been focused on that scope and will probably contain a number of biases that don't hold relevancy for the original purpose, but would be critical for any purpose outside that scope. For example, a wearable device trained to track the human metrics for a team of male Premiership footballers may be totally inappropriate for application to a team of female and male freedivers. And yet it might be selected for that purpose because the metrics it needs to track are identical. This map shows the publicly known cases of poor AI uses. As an example, there was a problematic facial recognition system that was used during the 1917 Champions League final in Cardiff. South Wales Police had crowds of up to 170,000 people. They needed to identify potential terrorists and other criminals. And in such a large crowd, it meant the police turned to technology. Unfortunately, 92% of those identified were false positives. Was that fair? Should more than 2,000 people be detained so that 200 wrongdoers can be apprehended? And I'm using round numbers here. The force blamed the high number of false positives or wrongly detained people on poor quality images supplied by other agencies, as well as the fact that it was the first major deployment of the technology. Privacy and freedom campaigners say this is dangerous for civil liberties. Others say that the cost is small in comparison to the inconvenience of a false alarm or a real terrorist incident. However, I'm not pessimistic about AI. An alternative map shows good examples. I'm sure there are other projects that we don't know about yet. Good news always seems to travel slower. AI has real potential for good, and we need good people involved to make sure that such a powerful tool is used consciously and well. There will need to be a trade-off for all uses, just like any other thing that involves more than one stakeholder. These can't be done as we did with old systems, because AI algorithms could be reused inappropriately. Projects are coming to light where AI has made positive advances quicker. You've probably all heard about the snow leopard research, with an AI system scanning remote camera footage so that the human researchers only need to look at the few highlights that are actually relevant. Perhaps you've used AI-driven chatbots on websites or Microsoft Office dictation capabilities that can speed up tasks. It wouldn't be 2020 without mentioning some of the ways in which AIs have been used in the pandemic. Northwestern University's Blum Cardiovascular Institute in the USA have an algorithm that can identify COVID-19 in chest x-rays, and that's been used to flag patients that should be isolated and tested. Funders from Canada and Sweden and the University of York and others are working on AI projects in Africa to gauge the impact of public health messages, track the public's attitudes to COVID-19, track gender-related violence, and predict the spread of the virus. The aim is to understand the overall conditions that must be overcome to improve public health interventions in future epidemics. Numerous AI projects have been working on existing drugs, known therapeutic plants, and the proteins actually in the human body, and past coronavirus-type treatments to help develop potential therapeutics for COVID-19. And a team from MIT who were actually working on a diagnostic tool for Alzheimer's using voice recordings have adapted their AI and knowledge to assess coughs for potential COVID-19 cases. I'd encourage all IT and quality professionals to gain a basic understanding in this technology. It will be an area where we all probably have to do some work. The Institute of Coding has some, fortunately, free courses on the Future Learn MOOC platform. They are a great start for those who want to get skills in this area. You'll also find courses on other platforms like LinkedIn, Google, and the commercial online training services. And today Cambridge joined the party. There's postgraduates and master's studies looking at AI, ethics, and responsible systems. Oxford has had an institute for a while. Cambridge today announced they have a master's course. And other universities are involved as well. So if you're interested in postgraduate study, that's there. So what other skills do you need? Well, this looks like a big list. It looks daunting. So let's try and group some of them. First, there's the classic quality professional skills like testing and experiment design, system engineering, and the maths and stats that go with every engineering-related discipline, and of course, quality assurance. We're also on familiar ground with standards and methods, quality management, change management, knowledge management, and risk management, and organizational management and governance. Quality managers and quality professionals have been close to for some years. As our systems have developed, quality professionals have also looked at user experience and user interface work, and that's not surprising. Quality professionals were working on HCI, or human computer interface studies, in the 1970s. So this isn't as new as it might seem to some. So the new ground is areas which have been in computing for a while, but not really part of the quality agenda. Those are human behavior and philosophy. As professionals who spend our time asking, why? Once we are over the initial hurdle of thinking of these as humanities subjects, we might realize that the fundamentals of these topics are important to what we do with systems. The key will be having sufficient understanding of each of these topics to notice an opportunity, an anomaly, or a gap, and to ask an expert for more information. It's a wonderful opportunity to get them to explain things that look wrong or different or inexplicable. It's hard to challenge an expert if they are determined that they have sufficient expertise, they know what they're doing, and are beyond question. However, research by several groups, including those at Harvard, LSE, and particularly the Blanchard Group, have recognized that the most masterful of a subject will decline in performance unless they have new challenges. I suspect that part of the reason why there's a backlash against experts in popular culture is not from their expertise, but from the reaction to being questioned that some develop in later careers. Some of the biggest discoveries that have been through people asking stupid questions. With a risk of stagnating performance from our high achievers, it's in a business's best interest to have someone who will ask these questions and test those rehearsed answers. Excuse me. And as an expert myself, let me assure those other experts in the audience that I recognize that frustration of being challenged again at the end of a long working day. However, it is a price worth paying to have a quality professional at your side who might be asking awkward questions, but is also prompting you to remember your assumptions and checking that old formulas work in new circumstances. You're less likely to get bored with a subject that has sustained your career. And I've actually seen it reignite passions. Those nudges that research tells us is what keeps us experts at the top of our game. So technology such as AI and VR, virtual reality, is developing at speed. The conditions are right in a way they haven't been for 30 years. Machines will follow the bias built into them. Humans can recognize that bias. Humans may spot missing or sparse data, but so can the machines, and they're more likely to spot that the algorithms are technically incomplete. Humans understand if that incompleteness actually matters. Humans can make judgments, solve messy problems, find new ways of thinking. But humans also have a natural bias and can get too close to the work. Having new ideas brought in with a broader view and a questioning mind is how quality professionals can aid these developments. So, one more thing. Apart from that list of 6 things, actually, let me just read them out. Ethics, standards, bias recognition, governance, design, and scope of use that we need to pay attention to. Questions are important. We've always been good at asking questions. It's something that humans can do that AI cannot. They can't step out of the scope of the question framework and review the wider context or purpose. They can't yet be empathic and consider emotions. They don't understand purpose and why. It's embedded in our training that we ask many different questions. Indeed, as I mentioned, our colleagues might become very frustrated by these unending questions, but they're vital for the development of products that are coherent and businesses that are robust. So we must continue to ask questions like, are we absolutely certain of this requirement? What's the source we've used, and are we sure of their integrity? What are the risks around this thing? Is this anomaly a problem? Who can we ask to review this? What is the exact sequence of events? It's deeply embedded in a qualities professional's way of working, and one thing that cannot be automated at advanced level. Without quality professionals with this training, no matter what their job title, the world risks that we will continue to build ineffective systems, or biased systems, or dangerous systems. This is an interesting quote from Charles Handy. Whereas the historic manager of the past knew everything, effectively he's saying, the post-historic manager knows how to ask the questions and develop people. The days in which we promote the best programmer into management should be past. It isn't productive. It isn't economic sense. We need skilled technicians, respected professionals, and trained managers, and especially properly trained managers. I was fortunate to meet Charles Handy some years ago when he was talking about retiring, something that thinkers rarely do. I asked him if in modern, flatter organisation structures there was a role for people other than managers to ask awkward questions. I'm sure you'll realise that the result of the discussion was that we agreed. Indeed, there was. We agreed it wasn't a role for quality or for technical leaders. It was something for everybody to engage in. In fact, it rings something like the old saying that quality is everybody's job. With that in mind, I'm going to leave you with the thought that quality professionals in the future will be there to support professionals of different disciplines by being the expert in asking quality questions. And I'm going to leave you with the list of the images that were sourced from a very useful site called Unsplash. The maps were sourced from Responsible AI, and they've been tracking those projects for a long time. I mentioned the Institute of Coding and their Future Learn courses, and Future Learn is a platform that was developed with the Open University and lots of other players as well. And also on there is my my email, and if people want to get in touch and either talk about any of these issues or about things we've been through on the AGM, that would be a good thing. Now, I'm just looking to see if I have any questions, and I don't appear to have any. Has anything else cropped up in your screen, Myrat?
No, I think it's the same situation. I don't see it on my screen, but I would like to actually ask you, not so much a question, but if something you could do. You mentioned about all the various different courses, etc. Could you send me an email of those, and I'll circulate it round to the members of the, the quality specialist group.
Yes,
also
I
to
will
our
pick those.
non-BCS members on their link, so we can actually. I think there's a lot of really excellent courses that you mentioned, and
yes, most of them are on Future Learn in the link that's on the screen at the moment.